a study about how the rise of China has reshaped the world. And this is part of my study. I'm going to make 3 points. Number one is what is the governance, global governance we're talking about. And second is how China's rise has actually benefited from and also reinforced the global order or global governance as we know. Last point is the opportunities and challenges to both China and global governance as China's rise will continue. And first, what is the global governance? We know that so-called governance is based on a set of institutions, norms, principles, and laws. Without those, we cannot even talk about global governance. In today's global governance, actually 3 sets of institutions that's being established under the leadership of the United States and its allies after World War II. That is politically in terms of international affairs, we have United Nations and all the institutions established, developed around the United Nations. And second, we have WTO, just a previous speaker has so elegantly described how WTO can shape a country or sovereign country's behavior. WTO and a set of institutions, laws, and norms. And third one, of course, that governs, this WTO governs our economic behavior and the trade. And the third set of institutions is like World Bank, IMF, which governs our financial order, global financial order. Those are the so-called, in my view, global governance is set upon those institutions. Now, how China's rise has benefited and reinforced those institutional orders. We have to say how China rise in the first place. China is not the first rising power. Before China, the many rising powers started from Great Britain and then Soviet Union, Germany, Japan, United States. All of those countries has been a rising power a certain period of time. And, but all of them have 2 fundamental differences, the way they are rising and the way China is rising. The first difference is this. All those rising powers, a precondition for the rise is that they all have a global reach military capability. In other words, all those powers had a military power that can fight massive wars far beyond the border. Either Great Britain or Germany or Japan or Soviet Union or United States. They all have this kind of capabilities. But when China was rising, about 30 years ago, even to this date, China still does not have this so-called global reach military capability because on the one hand, the dominance of mighty United States, on the other hand, because China's development has far beyond the so-called developed countries. So China does not have this. And second fundamental difference is even more, I think, significant is this. All those rising powers, the process of the rising is also the process of challenging the existing international system. For example, the British challenged the international order established by Spaniards, and Germans and Japanese challenged the international order established by Anglo-Saxon countries. And Soviet Union, of course, challenged Americans' international system. Even United States, when it was rising, actually challenged the international system established by the British. But we Americans were lucky that during our rising, we have 2 world wars, and United States correctly, opportunistically changed side with choose the right side. And also the decline of Great Britain during the 2 world wars actually made Americans' rise or US rise relatively less costly and peaceful. But China is the only rising power in the history that does not challenge the existing international system. Instead, China tried to integrate itself into the system. Although this international system was not established by China, was not maintained by China, and is not led by China at all. It was established, maintained, and led by democracies, headed by United States. So therefore, a precondition of China's rise is not a military power, it's not a global reach military capability, it's reform and open. China has to reform itself so it can be accepted by this international system, which is not China's in the first place. And China has to open up so the others can also get into China to help China to integrate into the system. In Chinese, we call it 与世界接轨. Right? If you connect track with world, you have to make your track. Your track is adaptable to the world. So, therefore, China's rise is a process of China trying to change itself so that it can be accepted by the world. And meanwhile, on the other hand, China has to open up itself so the world can integrate into China. That's why China's rise has to be peaceful, because China does not challenge the existing international system. But that does not mean that China's rise will bring the peace forever, because a peaceful rise, I always argue, does not mean China will remain peaceful after China's risen. That's the fundamental question we have to answer all the time. Let me give you an example how difficult the Chinese rise really is. The previous speaker just mentioned, it took China almost 15 years to be accepted by WTO. In all those 15 years is what the China tried to change itself so the WTO can admit China. This goes to my third point, the challenges, opportunities. The first challenge, or also opportunities, because in Chinese philosophy, challenges, opportunities always come together. The first challenge to Chinese, even to this date, is a Chinese system, internal political system, or economic structure is not compatible with the mainstream of international community that China tried to get into. That's the fundamental source of China's problem with the outside world. Let me repeat, is that internal political system of China, for whatever reason, is incompatible with the mainstream of international community. Of course, it's not compatible because international community or international governance, whatever we call it, is led by democracies. Their political system, of course, is the mainstream. In this international order or international system China tries to get into, of course, there's a lot of problems, economically, politically, psychologically, and even socially. So how China can get into this system is a continuous struggle to change itself on the one hand, and on the other hand, the outside world has to adapt a change in China. So let's give credit to China. So nowadays, a lot of people argue so-called the Beijing consensus, Washington consensus, keep blaming on China. But you look carefully, China has changed much, much more than people wanted to change. China has changed much, much more than the world in which China is, at least in terms of population, is 1/4 of the world, changed for China. But here comes to this situation. If we look at today's world, the trend, the strategic, the major trend of today's world is two trends. Number one, economic integration. This is irrevocable. China benefited from international economic integration, and China will continue to push forward this economic integration. Why is it irrevocable? Because not just because China is the #1 trading power on earth, but because if you look at all the mechanisms, either led by China or by United States, by Europe, all those ITPP or RECP or TTTP, whatever, the kind of new order we try to build to reshape our economic behavior is try to bring us together, not try to make us go home. The computation in the international economic integration is who is to making the rules of the game, so we can upgrade our economic behavior in a way to get into with each other. Another trend, the second trend, which is more challenging than the first one, is that we're moving from the unipolar world into multipolar world. In this trend, we see a fundamental difference in terms of interest between the United States, the certain hegemon and China, because China, of course, want to promote the development towards multipolar world, and the United States want to maintain its dominance in this part. This is where the two major powers cross swords with each other, and this struggle will continue. My argument is this: the new type or new kind of global governance we are going to witness is very much coincide with these two trends that we're going to see. In other words, to what extent all of us can work together, especially major powers, especially the United States and China, can work together to strengthen this economic integration. I do not believe this counter-globalization trend can last very, can sustain or can last very long. I can go more, into more details why I have this kind of view. So how we can work together is it's a great pity that TPP is short, but either TPP or IECP or One Belt, One Road, all those mechanisms will bring us together. And how we are going to handle this process is how we are going to develop our international economic governance. And second trend is much more difficult, because a multipolar world does not just mean we have a multipolars or have multi-powers in this country, but also means a diversity in the way we govern ourselves. We have democracy, have non-democracy. If we get into multipolar world, we will have United States, have China, have Europe, have Japan, have Russia, or have India. In terms of political system, this is much more diversified than the unipolar world. How we are going to justify ourselves to adapt to this increasingly multipolar and multi-diversity world, that's another way how we are going to see the next generation or next round of political global governance. Again, the good news is that up to this extent, all the major powers, including China, including the United States, all of them agree with each other. That is, we have to start from what we've got. That is, start from United Nations, UN, WTO, or with World Bank, MFA. The best example is the AIB. When AIB was established, it was firmly boycotted or against by the United States. But once it's realized that AIB is unstoppable, is there, United States changed gears, said, look, the focus is not whether we should have an AIB or not. The focus is that the AIB should join the game by abiding to, by following the order of established order or established rule of game. And the AIB, very fortunately, AIB agreed to join the existing international financial order rather than make a revolution. So my point here is this. That is, whether or like or not, I do not believe United States and China will fight each other against these two trends. In the long run, I think United States and China will work with each other to promote these two trends, because the two trends are irrevocable. And why I say so? Because if we look at the way China rises, that's China rises by integrating itself into the US-led international system rather than challenge the system, the consequence, the most important consequence is that United States and China has been irrevocably and unprecedentedly interdependent. So the other day at the Vardai conference last week, I had an argument with Professor Mishamer, because he argues that China and United States are locked into a zero-sum game, which will lead to a confrontation. I told him that's impossible. Why? Because if United States and China will get into a confrontation eventually, they have to engage in a zero-sum game. On that part, Professor Mishamer is absolutely right. But the problem is that the interdependence between United States and China has wiped out the foundation of zero-sum game between two major powers. And what is the foundation for zero-sum game? You have to meet four conditions. Number one, policy is ideologically driven rather than interest driven. Based on ideologically driven policy making, then the world will be divided into black and white. You're either on my side or on his side, just like between the Soviet Union and the United States. Number three, because of that, you're going to have an economy independent or even isolated from each other. That's why all those code for measures like sanction can't work. Last but not the least, both sides will form military alliances for final confrontation, final war. But nowadays, almost everyone's policymaking is driven by interests, including the United States and China. That's why we have AIB. The turning point is the most important, most trustworthy US allies join the AIB. They join the AIB is not because they love China. It's because they love China's political system. It's because they accepted China's incompatible political system with them. It's because driven by the interests. AIB is a fast-track vehicle that can bring the European powers back to the center of action, Asian Pacific. And because of that, it is now increasingly difficult, if not entirely impossible, to divide the world into two pieces. You are either my side or his side. Nobody can do that, not even the United States. Of course, China will never be able to do that. I don't think China wants to do that in the first place. Thirdly, now we have an economy that is truly interdependent. And people always make arguments, say, look, in the 1930s, Great Britain and Germany are so interdependent with each other, but did not prevent them to go into war. I think that's a wrong argument. That's a very misleading argument. Because in the 1930s, the interdependence is measured by trade. How much stuff I buy from you, how much stuff you buy from me. But today's interdependence goes much, much deeper than that. It penetrated in all areas of economic activities: finance, technology, innovation, development, manufacture, marketing, debt, and so on and so forth. We're so much into each other. As a result, nowadays, policy making in the United States against China or for China, I've been working in Washington, D.C. for 5 years. I know. The U.S. policy towards China is a constant struggle and internal debate, because this interdependence between the United States and China has so much diversified interest groups who have a stake in policymaking. If White House or Congress make a policy which is good for Wall Street, maybe manufacturers will be pissed off. If you made a policy good for environmental groups, human rights people will be very unhappy. If you made a policy good for trade, labor union will be very mad. So US policy making about China policy making is a constant debate and a struggle and something like that. And same thing in China too. When China make a policy vis-a-vis the United States, if a Minister of Foreign Affairs is happy, a Minister of Commerce will be pissed off. If Shanghai is happy, and people in Sichuan might be very mad. That's why the bilateral relationship between two major powers, between the United States and China, you like it or not, are defined no longer by their so-called bilateral relationship. The bilateral relationship between the United States and China is defined by internal politics. That is why it is wishful thinking to think the United States or China can still capable or willing to engage each other in a zero-sum game, because the foundation is no longer there. And because of that, the US-China relationship in terms of global governance, the US-China relationship has far transcended bilateral relationship. In a way that, on the one hand, whatever issue, I'm done. If the issue between the United States and China is an issue with global implications, it's a global issue. On the other hand, whatever issue we face as a human being as a whole, it cannot be managed, let alone be solved, without communication, consultation, and cooperation between the United States and China. So this is my conclusion. China's rise, because the way it has risen, has really helped all of us to reshape our world in a way that not only China benefited from the international system or global governance we benefited from, but China's rise has also reinforced not only the global governance, but the way we look at and the way we practice global governance. By the way, the Chinese have done this not because Chinese are nice or gentle. No, no, no. They do this for their national interests. Thank you.